Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. May is officially over and we are well into June now, which means we are so close to summer in England. I thought about time I should probably do my May roundup and go through all the books that I read in May. And without further ado, I'm going to show you what I've done so far with my journal, and then we'll talk through the books as we go. Oh, she makes more use out of that beanbag than I do. Anyway, so here's my journal. The first page I always come to is my bookshelf page. I colour in a book for every book that I've read that month. May was my best month so far. I've done 6 books in May, one of which was an audio book, but again, I'm quite proud of myself there because I did want to read an audiobook this year because I've never actually sat down and listened to one. Then I moved on to my Kindle page, which is where I list all the books that I've read, just the titles, so that I have a kind of consolidated list of all the books that I've read. I do this on this page because I read on Kindle, so it kind of felt appropriate to do this kind of layout. The books that I've read this month are the 3 Boys of Tommen books. So I've read Saving 6, Redeeming 6 and Taming 7, all by Chloe Walsh. I had a bit of a binge of that series because I really wanted to get to Taming 7. I've done The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and then I read The Paid Companion by Amanda Quick. So, Lars, what does that look like in statistics, I hear you say? Well, we're going to get there. So I turned to my May statistics page where I group all the overall statistics for the month. As I previously said, I have done 6 this month, which totaled, and I am so mentally boggled by this, 3,298 pages. Now, this is definitely down to the Boys of Tommen book. I've averaged 549 pages per book, which, bearing in mind my usual book lengths are probably around the 300 page mark, and I've done more books this month than usual. I definitely did better with my reading in May. Next, we moved on to the Book of the Month award. This month I awarded Book of the Month to The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which, even for me, it's took me by surprise that I put this one forward, but it felt the most, while I loved the Boys of Tommen books, it felt the most unique to me, and it felt something that I'd never read this kind of book before. So I really enjoyed it. So I just felt like it had to go forward. I don't think it's going to compete with some of the other books that I've picked from the other months. However, I definitely wanted to give it its accolade there. So I finally officially did it. I finished my first ever audiobook. So I get to add that to my audiobook page. Don't know if it will surpass 1. I didn't mind listening to an audiobook, but I do prefer reading. The audiobook I listened to was 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I don't know whether I'd have read this kind of book in a physical book. It was definitely interesting. It was definitely well narrated. Is that the right word for it? Narrated? I suppose so. Must be. That's what I meant. You know what I meant. Anyway, then I moved on to my bingo cards. There were a couple of bingo cards. There was definitely a book club in there, which was, to be fair, the book club could have been one of 2. It could have been The Bodyguard by Catherine Center or The Paid Companion by Amanda Quick. They were both book club picks this month, for 500 pages. All 3 Boys of Tommen books over 500 pages, so they all fit that. And yeah, I think that was it for the bingo card on this occasion. There wasn't any DNFs this month, which is fantastic. However, as I said, there was 2 book club books, which was The Bodyguard by Catherine Center and The Paid Companion by Amanda Quick, which I mentioned in the bingo card section. There was definitely a vast improvement on last month's book club picks because I actually enjoyed both of these. They were fun, kind of light reads. We haven't actually met as a book club yet to discuss them, so I don't know how the others felt about them. However, I think they were nice reads and they were easy. So now the moment of truth. What did I think of each book that I read? We started with the royal we, me, I read Saving Six of the Boys and Tommen books by Chloe Walsh. I was really dreading reading these, and I was putting it off because I did feel like surely it was going to be really repetitive and going to cover the same kind of content from the first two books, because it's almost Joey's point of view. I was actually really pleasantly surprised. I loved learning about how Joey and Aoife kind of came about and their backstory, because you don't really get much of Aoife in the first two books. You can just tell that she's quite a rock for Joey, and you do see a lot more of Joey, but even then you don't really understand him. You don't really see the amount of emotion he feels in these books, in the first two books, because obviously it centers around his sister. I rated this one a 4-star. I wouldn't say it was as good as Binding 13. Obviously Binding 13 I rated 5-star. However, it was a close one. Like, I think I could have, I'm really pleasantly surprised that it wasn't as repetitive as I thought it was going to be. This one centers around how Joey and Aoife actually come to get together, and the start of their romance. You see kind of the history behind the family dynamic before all the events of Binding 13, and how Joey kind of helped basically look after all his siblings. And then you see Aoife's side of the story and the vast difference between the two families. I really loved this book. If you're like me and you're nervous about starting Saving Six and Redeeming Six because you're worried that it's not going to live up to Binding 13, I would say go for it. I would definitely give it a try. Now, that being said, Redeeming Six, which is the next installment, it's not as good as Saving Six. It felt a little bit more slower paced. There are certain events, for those of you that haven't read the Boys of Tommen books, that happen in the Binding 13 and whatever the second one in the series is called. I should know this. That overlap into Redeeming Six, and I felt myself the whole way through Redeeming Six wanting the book to get past that main event that happens, because I wanted to see what would go on and what would happen, and I felt like the whole book was leading up to that, and you don't really get to it until probably nearly 70% of the way through the book. So it kind of felt a long time to wait. And I think I mentioned on the first two books that major events seem to happen around 70% of the way through Chloe Walsh's books. And this is definitely the case in Redeeming Six. So Redeeming Six was probably not as good as Saving Six, which is really surprising because I kind of wanted to see the events after what happens in Binding 13 with Joey and Aoife. And I suppose that is where I was a little bit disappointed. So I did only give this a 3-star. However, at 70% of the way through the book and everything that happens, it's very wholesome. Yeah, I don't really know how I felt about it. I loved it. I definitely enjoyed the book. I don't know whether I'm just giving it more hype because it's Boys of Tommen and I love Boys of Tommen books, a bit like I was with Veronica Speedwell and the last one. I don't know. It wasn't as good. But the whole reason I really wanted to push through Saving Six and Redeeming Six was because I was so looking forward to Taming Seven. So I did persevere, and then I think the book did make up for it in the end. And I loved watching the relationship progress. There's such a good relationship. Wow, I say they're really good. They just need to communicate better. That is all I'd say. They need to communicate better. But yeah, definitely give these ones a go. That brings me nicely on to Taming Seven, which I was so anticipating this book. Since I started reading Binding 13, I have wanted to read Taming Seven. I've been waiting patiently for it to come out, and don't come for me. It disappointed. I rated it a 4-star, and I'm not even sure why I rated it a 4-star. I think I rated it 4-star just because I love Gibbsy and Claire. But their story was so it let down. They deserved better, Gibbsy and Claire. They deserved a better story. There's a certain character in the book that annoyed the hell out of me the whole way through. Again, in typical Chloe Walsh pattern, which is not a criticism. I understand that there's going to be inciting incidents throughout the book, and the fact that you get a second one at 70% is probably a good thing. It keeps the book interesting. But 70% seems to be the point where you learn what you need to learn about Gibbsy to understand why he acts the way he does. And I don't think you get enough story about Claire. All Claire seems to be in this book is in love with Gibbsy since she was a child. That is literally all that there seems to be to Claire, and her relationship with this other person in the book that is all I can say. So yeah, it definitely didn't live up to the whole anticipation, the lead up to the book. I don't know. I was just really disappointed. I don't know why I gave this 4-star. I think I just gave it 4-star because I love Gibbsy and Claire and all the other books. They're such great characters. And don't get me wrong, the story is really interesting, but it just wasn't. It just didn't live up to the hype for me, which was really disappointing. The next book was a book club pick, which was The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This got picked by one of the other girls in the book club. I haven't had a chance to speak to them yet to see what they thought of the book. It was a nice read. It was easy. It was a cute kind of summery vibe read. I wouldn't say anything really sticks out or as being memorable from the story. The characters were really likable. The majority of the story was probably quite predictable, which I understand a lot of these days. The kind of romance novels we're reading, they're gonna be quite predictable, and there's gonna be an element of predictability to it. However, there was one aspect of the story which is involving him and his past, which was really surprising, and it was quite wholesome when it got to the end, and it was a really nice ending. I thought it was okay. It was an okay book. It was an easy read. It was I think it would be a quite nice beach holiday read by the pool or read on the beach book. I don't know whether it kind of encourages me to read any more Catherine Center books. It wasn't anything that really wrote me in and thought, oh, I must read the next one by Catherine Center. But I'm not disappointed by it. It was kind of what I expected. And if you want a cute light read, then I would recommend it. It's something you could read. Then we go on to my audio book that I listened to, which is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This was not what I expected. I wouldn't usually kind of gravitate, because obviously it's kind of written in a way like a biography or an autobiography about a fictional character. And I wouldn't usually gravitate towards these styles of books, but I picked it up because it was free on Spotify as an audiobook, and I knew I wanted to try and read at least one audiobook this year. I read it because it was available to me for free. The first kind of 30 to 40% of the book, I would say, was a little bit slow. I wasn't really gripping with it. I wasn't getting into it. And then as it got to the halfway point, I started to really enjoy the book and seeing where it goes. The characters are very, very naturally flawed, and the things that Evelyn goes through in her life was just really interesting to read about. It kind of put a whole other perspective on how others lived back in the kind of the 50s, 60s, 70s. The big reveal at the end I did not predict. which was always good. I would say I'm glad I listened to it as an audiobook and not read it as a book, because I don't know whether I'd have actually gelled with it if I'd have read it as a book. But yeah, I think it's one of those books that really stands out as quite unique, and it's not something I've ever read that kind of book before. I definitely think it's something that everyone really should give a go. Not everyone, obviously, but if you're a bookworm and you like more, I feel like it's a bit like it's not a classic, but it's it could be like later on. So I definitely would recommend reading this one, or obviously on Spotify, it's free as an audiobook if you've got Spotify, I don't know, Spotify Premium. I'm not really sure. Nothing sponsored by this video. I'd definitely give it a recommend. I gave this one a 4-star in the end. Then the final book of the month was, again, another book club book. Haven't had a chance to speak to the girls about it at work. This is kind of like my typical, one of my favourite genres, historical romance fiction with a bit of mystery. I would say there's better out there. However, it was a fun read, but I did feel like the romance was a little bit unbelievable. Like, it felt more lustful than loving. I didn't really understand. I don't feel like there was any. He kind of respected her for how she is, and they were both equally kind of quirky. But I don't feel like their romance was believable. I couldn't see what it is that they really liked in each other. I think the mystery was a little bit like far-fetched, and the big reveal was a little bit like, meh. It was okay. Like, it wasn't, you know how in a mystery sometimes you think, oh my gosh, I never would have put it down to that person. You didn't get that. You didn't get that with this book. It was a little bit flat. It was a nice read. It was easy. If you want something, I don't know. I gave it 3-star. I don't think it was an amazing book, but it was a nice idea. But that kind of brings me to the end of all the books that I read in May. I was actually really happy with the results of May. The books were okay. There wasn't any 5-star reads, which was a bit disappointing. However, I have high hopes for next month. Hopefully we'll do better next month. If there are any recommendations for kind of books based on my ratings that I've already given that you would recommend to me, please do in the comments. That would be, I'd be more than happy to take recommendations for any books. Thank you again for watching the video, and if you did like my video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And just once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again for my July TBR. See you guys, bye!